Welcome to Omnisport, the ultimate African sports audio channel. Live and on demand at omniaudio.africa and streaming data free on the MTN network in South Africa. It's where Africa comes to play.
Omni Audio Africa, you listen to No Punches Pulled by myself, Colin Nathan. It's been a while, and every time I'm in the studio, it sounds like I'm in Parliament with like Jacob Zuma. Every time I come here, I am joined by a legend, and I legendary surname, legendary human being, legendary boxing trainer, manager, from the famous Toweel surname and name, Alan Toweel Jr. Welcome to Omni Africa Audio, and welcome to my show. It's been a while. We've battled to get this going and lock this in, so I kind of feel like, you know, you have your main course, and this is for me like kind of my dessert, seeing and speaking to you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Colin. Much appreciated.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Born on the 23rd of March, 1963. You've recently
65.
said 65. Your Facebook 663, hey?
Yeah, Facebook. Let's fix it up, eh? Yeah.
60. That's why I said to you earlier, like, are you 62? You just looked at me. 60 years old. So 60th.
Yeah.
Oh God, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Man.
Thank you. Thank you very
You
much.
look great. Yeah, I think the first question everyone would probably want to ask you, you've been asked this question so many times before. How proud are you to carry the Toweel name?
Oh, Colin, you don't understand. It's like the be-all and end-all of our lives. You know, it's a privilege to be even called a Toweel, you know, being born in such a great family. And we just do the best to uphold that name as time goes by.
So I've interviewed fighters and fighters that I've represented, and you know, the focus for me during the interview is always to try and find out something about my guest that I didn't know before. And you have such a strong history and knowledge of the sport. And being a Toweel, there's obviously a lot of pressure behind your surname for you as well. And I think, what was it like growing up in a family that was totally dominated by boxing as a Toweel?
It was awesome. I recall when we were young, when I was young, like a teenager, even before that, the family would get together on a Sunday for Sunday lunch, all the brothers, 6 of them, and my aunt, who's a nun, and my other aunt, who lives in Australia at the moment. And the only thing that we would talk about is boxing. And so we'd have lunch, and after lunch we'd sit together in the lounge. My father, he was the boxing historian of the family. He would recount events. He would record what would happen with his brothers, Vic and Willie, and he would tell stories. So he would sit there and tell stories about each and every member of his family, you know, and we would laugh, and it was amazing to sit and just to listen. And then eventually they would put on the 16 millimeter, you know, footage of Vic's fights when he fought and Willie's fights. And my aunt, she's very knowledgeable about boxing. She's 83 years old now, a Catholic nun. And you would just see the tears running down their eyes, just reminiscing on the past, you know. So those were awesome moments, you know. My grandfather would get up, dance, Papa Mike, he'd get up and dance and do the Lebanese dabka. It was the Lebanese dabka's original, the traditional dance. And during those times, and even up until when we talk about my family unit, my father and my mother, the only thing that we discussed was boxing. It wasn't like a job. It wasn't like a business. It was like a real passion that came out of this whole thing, you know?
Which leads me into my next question. I think everyone has their first boxing moment in memory. What was yours, and at what age?
My first moment.
Like, do you remember clearly that, okay, like, this is my first boxing memory?
There was a photo. I was 5 years old. There's a photo of me punching Koki Olufia, the South African lightweight champion. He was defending his title in Cape Town. I thought it was in 1970, you know. So there's a photo. Whenever I look at that photo, I think that was possibly the first thing that, at that age, at a young age of 5 years old, because then I used to go with my dad to the gym. From that age onwards, you know, every day watching these guys train and fight, you know.
Why did you go to the gym with your dad? Was it just
father and son?
Father and son.
That's how it was. Myself and my dad had a great relationship.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about Alan Senior, who obviously you can't not mention his name in the history of South African boxing. But but obviously I want to talk about you and embellish you in your career, which we'll get to during this interview. But let's just go back about the pressure of being at Toweel. You know, you're at school.
Yes.
You are in a famous family. The kids, obviously, politics starts with the kids. They decide what's hot and what's not. And maybe you got teased about being this tough Toweel.
Yes.
What was it like being at school and having the Toweel surname?
It's a good question. I'll tell you what. There were at one stage 5 Toweels at De La Salle College.
Wow.
De La Salle Holy Cross, it's called now. And each one in a different class, you know, and we ruled the school. So whenever there was a fight,
Call it Toweel.
they would all get involved, you know. It was quite amazing, you know. So that's how it was. And then my cousin Paul, he was really, he was an aggressive guy at school. He would handle anyone. If anyone touched any of us, he would step in there. So it was my cousin Michael, my cousin Paul, my cousin Vic, my cousin Jim, and then myself there. In actual fact, 5 of us.
Who was the most aggressive of the 5?
Paul.
Paul.
You couldn't touch Paul.
He was a good fighter.
He was also a very good fighter.
Got a draw against Charles Westhuizen.
Yes.
And let's actually talk about that second fight, because the true boxing historians will remember that fight. First fight was a draw.
Yes.
And then the second fight, inexplicably, you turned and you complained about a lower back pain and got counted out in the first round with, if I recall, I was still in primary school, but he barely got touched. What happened? In your opinion, obviously.
The first fight was a great fight.
Yeah, so Charles Westhuizen,
they got an award for that.
Yeah,
fight of the year.
Charles Westhuizen, Paul Toweel. First fight was a draw for South African boxing. Could have been in 1988 or 89.
Could have been. I thought you lost on a split decision. I can't recall the exact decision.
I'm almost sure it was a draw.
Yeah, but either it doesn't matter. It was a hell of a fight. They had to do it again. Yeah.
And then the rematch was clouded by controversy.
Yes, I was in the corner that day with my dad.
So you have a first-hand experience. Talk to us.
He started off well in the first one, and suddenly I think he threw an overhand right, and then he got a spasm in the back.
Pinched it over something.
That's it. And he was in tremendous pain. And I couldn't understand, and my father couldn't understand what was going on. I thought, what's going on here?
Right.
But there's nothing we could have done. He was in pain. And that's how the fight got stopped.
Yeah. There was a lot of stories of dives and stuff. And I remember, and this is probably going to freak you out, because I remember the quote from your late dad saying, you know, if a 2-year-old kid touches you on a certain nerve, it can hurt. Do you remember that quote from your late dad?
Yes, he said
it. It was in SA. It was SA Boxing World at the time, before it went Boxing World. And I remember reading that, and I thought, you know, I was still young and hearing the stories, and I thought maybe he's true. You know, it could be true.
Can I be honest with you? The word dive never even came into our vocabulary. That's why we could never believe that a Toweel would do that. You know, will participate in such an act. But he was in pain. He looked tremendously in pain. He was struggling.
And I think it's important to the listeners and the viewers that they actually do a bit of research on what we're talking about now, because the young generation won't remember this fight. But I remember the first fight. It was just breathtaking. Breathtaking.
What a fight, hey?
Okay, so let's get back to you. After high school, you did the army.
Yes, I did. With the army, we did national service I went to SARS. Instead of going to the army, I went to SARS.
Actually one of my questions.
You know? So we did the national service at SARS for 4 years, because I had studied. I did my BCom, I did my honors.
Yeah, I thought, why did I think you were an accountant?
I don't know. Yeah.
I'm mistaken.
No, I did my honors in finance, and then I did my higher diploma in tax.
Right.
Yeah, so I worked at SARS for a number of years. And
for all your sins.
For all your sins.
True.
Yeah, and you know, while I was working at SARS, I would go. My father would then pick me up to go with him. I used to work in town. He would fetch me, and we'd go to the gym at Jack Eustace Hall.
Right.
Yes.
Famous Jack Eustace. Yeah. Also been going turned over to Boyson's over 100 years.
Yes.
I saw something recently on socials with you that the Toweel legacy has been going on now for over 100 years. It's 101 years this year. Is that right?
Yes. I say from 1924.
1924.
And the reason why I say 1924 is my grandfather, he fought in the Olympic trials, and he was nominated to participate in the 1924 Olympics. He didn't go. His mom didn't want him to participate, you see?
Yeah.
And then he went on further, which was great, to train the 1948 Olympic team, which I believe is the best Olympic team we've ever had.
Right.
We had a gold medalist in Johnny Arthur. We had a bronze medalist in, George Hunter. Johnny Arthur. Yeah, Johnny Arthur. One of the two. Yeah. George Hunter won the gold medalist, sorry. Johnny Arthur was the bronze medalist. And my Uncle Vic was part of those Olympic team. That was part of the Olympic team also. He was out in the first round. And if you look at the reviews of that fight, and I've got documentation and reports from overseas, they got rid of all those 3 judges in the,
Was it as bad as the decision with Roy Jones in '88?
They say it's very similar. But they had to get rid of those 3 judges according to the appeal process. Yeah.
Question that probably you've been asked before, you in your boxing career, you fighting yourself. Why? Why didn't you fight?
What we used to do is, my father didn't want me to go to the amateurs, so we'd organize gym fights. So we would get guys coming to the Jack Eustace Hall, 4-rounders, guys from the townships, from different gyms, and he would put me in with them and we would fight. So I went for I had about 10 of those fights behind closed doors. I remember Herbie Vermeulen, his son, he was an SA welterweight champion. He used to pitch up there also, And I then went for my license, my professional license. I was 17 years old, and I got my professional license. Jeff Ellis was there at that time, and he was very excited about me going pro. Myself and Raymond Fourie, who's Perry Fourie's son. But then my father persuaded me not to go in the professional ranks. He said it's too hard a game. He said rather continue with your studies. I'll teach you how to train and manage, and that's the route I followed.
Yes,
there was one thing that I didn't have, and admittedly, I never had that killer instinct.
Which you need. You see, I could box, I could defend myself, and I had heart, but I could not knock. I would drop a guy, and I wouldn't carry on. I would hold back. And that's what... Did that have anything to do with 1956 with Willie Toweel tragically ending the life of Herbert Issacar?
Absolutely, because that story was all repeatedly told to us as youngsters, what happened.
It's still told today
yes,
by the old historians.
It was hectic, for my Uncle Willie, for the family at that stage, because you're not there. You're there to knock out the person.
Nothing personal.
Nothing personal, And when Issacar fought my Uncle Willie, they were good friends,
right?
But it was a war. And you could see, there's a photo of my uncle when he drops him, his face, the look on his face after he dropped Issacar. You could see something wasn't right. 52 hours later, he passed.
Right.
And that was a tragedy for him and for the family,
Yeah, was boxing, if I recall, was a school sport then, and it was banned shortly afterwards. Am I correct in saying that?
I can't recall. I'm not sure myself, whether it was banned, but there was a lot of cry to ban the sport of boxing.
Always is.
And my Uncle Willie received a lot of criticism. He was crucified for that.
Right.
I'll tell you why. Because Vic was the hero of South African boxing. Right. Willie had to live under Vic's shadow. And the only place where Willie really was famous was in Cape Town, funny enough.
Why?
But it just was, I suppose they loved the style there. They always, every time Willie fought, they compared him to Vic. Because they love that rugged, non-stop action style of Vic, So going back to the Issacar thing, he took a lot of flack for that loss, and but he kept in close contact with their family. That's one thing. And I think, he went to daily mass every single day of his life after that fight,
And it's crazy because he fought a guy called Emil Griffith, who I've actually reading the book. I'm halfway through it.
Yes.
And I've often called you during odd times and asked you to relate stories to me.
Yes.
And Griffith ended up beating Parrots, which was a horrible stoppage by Ruby Goldstein.
Absolutely.
He got caught in the moments, and he ended up killing Parrots.
Yes.
Killing him in the
12th
ring.
round.
And it was just horrific. And there's a note in the book that your uncle sent to him saying, I know what you're going through. I've been through it before. Just... It was never intentional. Just
absolutely.
Keep your head up. It's okay.
Absolutely.
You can't be blamed.
No, absolutely. Because when Willie was going through that process, he went for therapy, but he also had my father. My father was a very good therapist. He would give examples of Ezra Charles, who had killed a fight, knocked out a fight, and the fighter passed on. Sugar Ray Robinson. Mm-hmm. This happens in boxing, And it was...
Yeah, so that's my next which kind of leads into my next question with your dad. Alan Senior was tough cookie. Took no bullshit from anyone.
Yes.
It was his way, no way.
That's it.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be any kind of way.
Yes,
and there's a story that's quite famous that I've heard through several people, and I want you to confirm it for me, is that your late dad wouldn't allow anyone to come watch, particularly the boxers. He wouldn't allow their friends to come and watch them train because he would chase them away and say, listen, this is his work.
That's it.
Is that true?
Absolutely correct. It was his job, and he felt that he could do his job on his own to the best of his ability. He didn't want any interferences from outside. He didn't want family members in the dressing room. He didn't want wives in the dressing room. He didn't want husbands, whatever the case may be. He didn't want that. It's just him and his fighter. Similar to the same pattern that the old trainers used to, Charlie Goldman, Whitey Pims, and they all followed that process, you see. Yeah, so he was a very disciplined man. He wouldn't take no nonsense, but he was a fair man, you know.
And, what was he like as a father to you?
Sure, my father was very strict, man.
Strict?
Yeah, very hard, man. But I appreciate that because I don't think I could have been brought up any other way, you know.
Did you get any huntings?
Oh, yes, without a doubt. And why not? I deserved it. You give me a clap on the backside. Yes, yes. You know, because I deserved it, you know, and rightfully so. And you know what? As the years went by, I loved him for that. You know?
Okay.
So I would never ever say to myself, "Oh, my father did this to me." No, he did it because I deserved it. At the end of the day, and like I said, I had a great relationship with him. Like he had a great relationship with his father, and the same as the brothers with their father. You know.
It would be remiss of me not to mention your sister, who I've also got a very soft spot for. But I don't really talk much to her because she watches other sports. So she's also a big boxing fan, Mariana. Big boxing fan. She's always by your side, screaming and shouting. A big shout out to her if she ever watches this. I'm teasing her about watching other sports. So, but she's very supportive of what you do in the sport. How important is it to have that family unit behind you still to this day? Including your mom, who also gets very vocal at ringside when she's there.
I think it's exceptionally important, and it doesn't just go with us. Before, my grandmom used to cook for the newspapermen, the reporters, close to 600, 700, 800 people coming to the house to house after Vic used to win. My grandmother. My grandmother used to do that on a weekly basis, continuously cook for people that supported the Toweel family. It was just boxing, so she was heavily involved there. My mom with my dad. I mean, my mother was like she attended to the managerial affairs of the Toweel gym. When Pierre Ferry fought Victor Galindez in 1975. Before that, my mom and my dad and my Uncle Morris, they traveled to Argentina to watch Galindez fight Len Hutchins. At that stage, the light heavyweight title was vacant. And Victor Galindez stopped Hutchins. And she went there, they met Tito Lectura, the manager of Galindez. She was part of the whole negotiating team, and they were able to then bring Victor Galindez to South Africa to fight Pierre Ferry for the world light heavyweight title.
During a time in the political era in South Africa, it was near impossible to have done as well.
But you know what was good about what I must mention is in 1973 when Pierre Ferry fought Bob Foster.
Yes,
that was the first multiracial fight in this country, and you know how that started.
Go on.
Pierre Ferry fought Foster the first time in Albuquerque, and he lost the fight. He lost on points. My Uncle Morris was the commentator on radio, and he gave Pierre Ferry way ahead. You know, Pierre Ferry's won this fight, 100%. After that fight, my father went to Mass, and he met Lou Vescusi, who is the manager of Bob Foster. And they sat after Mass, and he said, please, can you bring Bob Foster to this country just to defend his title? And there's a whole article on that.
Irrespective of the result, he wanted to make a political stand, clearly.
Yeah, bring him back. It will change boxing history, you know. And he was a bit reluctant. Somehow they got together talking, and somehow one thing led to the next, and they brought Foster over here to fight Pierre Ferry for the second time at the Rand Stadium. Crowd of 45,000 people. Yeah, amazing.
Crazy,
you know?
crazy.
Thereafter, my Uncle Morris promoted the first multiracial tournament in 1974. Tap Tap Makatini was on that bill. Pangaman, Norman Pangaman Sikapani, Pierre Free and Koki Olafia fighting international fighters. And I was there. It was a crowd of about 26,000 people. I was still a youngster. We were dishing out programs. And it was a big change for boxing in our country,
The relationship between your dad, and I want to go back, is obviously, it's very special. What was the first fight you worked in the corner with him you being his assistant?
It was I think I was 17 years, 1988, I think, yeah. I went into first time in the corner. I would go with him in the gym. I go with him to the gym, and I would also, for example, he'd want me to throw punches at Pierre Kutzer for speed work. At the age of 10, can you believe this? He made me throw punches at Pierre Free, and all Pierre Free did was help him to improve his movement in the ring. I would just throw him, he would turn me, throw him, turn me. It was amazing. That a young kid could work with a professional, and my father could make that work, and they could bring it into the fight. But yes, it was with Pierre Kutzer. I can't recall the exact fight, but it was around 1988. My father said, "You can come into the corner now," So I started working with him.
Were you licensed?
Yes. Then I was licensed.
Remember, that's why I got my license, and it's a record that will never be broken, because the old acts never had an age license.
Yes.
Now you have to be 18.
Yes.
The new 2001 act. But back then, there was no age limit.
So you could just go in the corner.
You could be licensed. And that's actually what happened with me, is that I used to get chased away by the late Marcus Temple.
Yes.
And then the one day he went up to my late dad and said, "Listen, there's no age limit. Just get him licensed and I'll stop chasing him away."
Absolutely.
And I was 12 years old. It was just crazy.
It just shows
it's crazy. Now I can do it because of the act. You've got to be 18.
Yeah, so we had to be licensed then,
And that was under Stan Christodoulou.
Yes.
Absolute legend as well, the sports. 31st of May.
31st of May, yeah.
1950.
Yeah.
Historic moment for you and your family.
Yeah.
Always will be. South Africa got their first world champion in your uncle, Vic.
Yeah.
You weren't born then,
No.
obviously. 15 years later, you popped out. But the significance of that, South Africa's first world champion. I mean, when I say that now, how does that resonate?
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing, because that was the pinnacle in the beginning of boxing in our country. Really, it went to that level.
8-division era, one champion,
and undisputed world champion. That word "undisputed" is such an important word. Today.
Yeah.
Today, everyone wants to be undisputed world champion.
Sure, that's what
It means you were the best at any point in time as a champion in your division. And he was that for 2 years and 8 months. Yeah. It's quite amazing, yeah.
Linear champion.
Absolutely.
Beat Manuel Ortiz in front of 20,000 people.
Yeah.
In the Wembley Stadium, which was kind of unheard of in those days. And then it was interesting because I was going through his record, and he didn't defend his belt straight away.
No.
Why?
The problem, not only politics, it's also finance.
Right.
To defend your title so many times. He had 10 non-title fights in between, you see. So it had to do with a lot with finance, but he got his chance to defend it 3 times successfully, and he did it proudly, and that's it.
Does the family get together on the 31st of May?
No, funny enough, not now, Okay. But that date is so relevant to us, to the family as a whole. I still recall that belt that he had, that Ring magazine belt.
Where is it?
It got stolen. They broke into his house. They stolen it. Sad, eh? He fought so hard for that thing. There was a lovely portrait of my Uncle Vic in my grandmother's lounge. It's about 1.5 meters with that beautiful belt standing there. It was something to see.
It was the Ring belt. Correct?
It was a Ring magazine
you
belt.
should contact Ring. They're now owned by Turkey Al Sheikh. Hard question to answer.
Yeah.
In your opinion, Vic, the greatest South African fighter of all time?
Yes.
Why?
He fought in an era when boxing was at its pinnacle. He fought in an era where there were 8 divisions. He fought the best of the best in his division. He was the first non-American to win the bantamweight division in 50 years. He had 13 fights as a champion. Okay, 10 of them were non-title defenses. Had they been converted to titles, he would have had 13 title defenses. And he fought in an era when Archie Moore was there. Oh my goodness. When Marciano was there. when Willie Pep was there, when Ezra Charles was there. Need I say more? You know, and that's why pound for pound, if you want to be a world champion, you must
Sugar Ray
become
Robinson as well. I don't know if you
Sugar Ray
mentioned
Robinson,
that. I can't mention
100%.
him.
No, it's Sugar Ray Robinson. So, you know.
In your opinion, I suppose, okay, that would be of all time. And in the current era of, since the new act, let's just say since 2001, who's been your favorite fighter for South African boxing of all time? Since
2001.
Yeah, the new act.
There were two fighters.
Right.
Brian Mitchell.
Sure.
And, Brian Mitchell was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yes, in the 80s.
He retired he came back in 94.
Yes.
But retired, yeah.
You know, I must be honest with you. Since Vic, Willie was for me, it was a great fighter. I have to go.
His draw with Robert Cohen.
Oh my goodness. And then to win 4 different titles in different weight divisions. And there was no junior feather, junior light. He went straight from bantam to feather to light to welter. And then to top the bull in the Madison Square Garden.
Right.
And beat a top-rated fighter in Len Matthews, who was at that stage one of the best lightweights in the world. And in front of a standing ovation, receives a standing ovation in Madison Square Garden. Sure, it's Vic, Willie. This is how I rate it. Vic, Willie, and Brian Mitchell. Vic, Willie, Brian Mitchell, I think put them there, you know. The latest one, for me, since 2000. Since 2000, I go for Hickey Butler.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice. But I mean, for me to say yes.
No, not without. No. Since 2000, definitely Hickey Butler. He's accomplished it all, not because no. It's a reality. He's done excellent in both divisions, you know.
He's also a great human being as
That's
well.
it, you know.
Why did you get back into the game? Like you took a dip, you were working for SARS. And when I say a dip, not like you weren't in boxing actively. You were always kind of on the peripheral, coaching one-on-one guys, teaching them how to box.
Yes.
And then you got back into the game. Why?
Okay. When my father passed on, it was heavy for us, I suppose, like any parent, you know, because I would go to the gym there in Boyston's and it was very lonely, you know, because when we used to train after training session, every training session, we always used to sit down for an hour or two and talk. So it was heartbreaking, you know. So then I had a youngster in 96 called Pedro Maljas.
Sure.
Yeah, he beat Leonard Steyn. Leonard Steyn was #1 lightweight in South Africa. And then he dislocated his shoulder, right? And then I backed away because it was difficult to get into the sport. You had Nick Durant there, all the fighters went to his stable, you know, and it was hard to get fighters. So then I backed away, you know. I tried to get back into the game. But it wasn't working for me. And then in 2006, I said to my wife, let's build a gym at my place, you know, because I always wanted to, you know, we weren't into these big gyms, you know. It was always my grandfather in a shack at home. My father, he went to Jack Eustace Hall, but he trained a lot at his place. My uncle Will also trained at his home. So I wanted something like that, you know. And I was offered, one of my friends offered me to, you can put a big building there with Alan Toweel boxing gym. You know, you got the name. I didn't want that. I just wanted something small from us. So in 2006, we built the gym and then we started moving. That's how I got back into the game.
And since then, since you came back to the sport, I could say, you produced several champions. Now, there's got to be one or two that stand out for you, and who are they and why?
Can I maybe discuss the fights?
Go on.
For me, one of the best victories for me was when Zulani Makhali fought Ali Faneka.
The second time. Yeah,
but
but he won the first one as well.
He won the first one.
Yeah.
And why? Because at that stage, he was considered finished. Right? He was fighting Ali Faneka, who had a draw with Guzman, had a split decision loss with Guzman for the IBF world title. That means he did win, you know, to get the. And now Zulani was he was not the favorite. But the way we planned that fight and the way he fought in Himdansani was an amazing fight. And I wish it was recorded because he really outclassed. It was a war, but he fought an amazing fight, winning the WBF world title. The other fight, which I really, really enjoyed was when Isaac Chilemba fought Bellew. The first one, I say the first one. Because
on a draw.
It was a draw.
Right. But I thought
he won the fight. Yeah, because when he walked in there, in the Eck Arena in Liverpool, they booed the hell out of us. When he walked out, They gave us a standing ovation. That was an amazing fight. That was for the WBC silver belt.
Correct.
Amazing fight, you know. I think when Munyai fought Mvulu, I think, in Bulgaria, it was a very good win for us also, you know, because again, underdog won the fight, you know.
Yeah, I thought you won that fight quite convincingly. I was very excited for that.
Yes.
And I had it 8-4 for you, if I recall. I remember that quite clearly, actually.
Yes. Bangile, when he fought Kusa.
Yeah.
Oh, that was an amazing win.
Yeah.
And they never thought anyone in Eastern Cape.
Right.
And it was an amazing win for him, the way he fought, the way he boxed Kusa, you know. The second fight, he lost on points. Hectic fight.
Hectic fight.
Hectic before the fight. We were crowded by people, the
Yes.
shouting. We were
crazy.
mobbed. It was crazy.
Yeah, that was on the undercard of Sivanati.
Yes, you guys.
That was crazy. It was a crazy weekend.
Crazy week, yeah. You know?
I'm going to tease you a little bit, and I often tease you about this. Your wife, who's obviously very strong in the household, works the corner with you in fights. Now,
Yes.
I've never, and I always tease you about it.
Yes.
How does that work? Like, I mean, you guys have obviously got a great relationship to the point that you feel comfortable with your wife because she's the boss at home, and now you're the boss in the corner. And how's that dynamic work? Because it's intriguing. And I love it. I've got to tell you, I think it's heartwarming to see in boxing.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, we've got a very good relationship. It's like my dad and my mom, you know. I mean, all their lives they were together. And my mom she knows boxing.
Oh, she does. Yeah, she does.
So with my wife, thank you. With my wife, it's also when we sit at the table, whatever we do, and if you're driving in the car, we talk in boxing. That's the reality. So she's fitted in so well, like my father's, like my mother, like my grandmother, you know. And that. Then I decided one day, I said, you know what, come in the corner with me, you know, and it works well. No need to shout and scream there. we got a job to do, and she understands that we got a job to do, you know. And she gives very good advice also, you know, while watching the fight, you know.
So she can analyze a fight.
She can, yes. I mean, if I watch fights overseas, she's sitting there watching it with me, you know. So it's not like the husband comes to work, husband comes from work, and the wife comes from another work. It's just that we combined and we work together as a team, you know.
When you started dating her, did she obviously like boxing?
She knew nothing about boxing.
Okay.
Nothing, you know.
So
the only thing she knew,
positive indoctrination.
Yes, yeah. The only thing she knew there was a heavyweight who had a moustache, you know. That's all she knew, you know. So but as time went by, she began to love the sport.
Obviously, you had a very soft spot for Pierre Kutsa, who I think back to his career. I think by the time he fought Riddick Bowe, I think that's when the world realized the guy could fight, and I thought it was a bit too late. If you had Pierre's career over now, would you have pushed him harder earlier?
Today's time. Today's time, yes, but not in that era.
You think that the momentum was good at the right pace?
Yes. You know, at one stage they wanted Pierre to fight James Tillis after Tillis had lost on a decision to Mike Tyson.
Oh, it was very competitive, 6-4.
Yes.
And the knockdown was the swinger, yeah.
My father said, no. Pierre's not ready for that. Pierre had to be nurtured very carefully, you know. And I think it was perfectly done at the right time. And when he did fight the big guys, these were great fighters.
Oh, yeah.
Bowe,
he hung in there with Bowe. It was surprising,
it was
man.
a war.
Yeah.
It was a war, and he got hit low.
Yeah, he did get hit low. Yeah, he
Bowe
did.
becomes world champion, a unified world champion after that.
Yeah.
I mean, whoever he lost to was against an elite fighter who became a world champion.
Let me tell you something crazy. In 1988 in Cape Town, at the Good Up Centre, I watched him lose a decision to Ozio Kasia.
Yes.
And in the rematch, Kasia came in a little heavier and chunkier, and he won the rematch.
Yes.
But I was there. I still remember they wore red burned boxing gloves, if I recall.
Yes.
And it was crazy because Pierre was expected to win.
Yes, 100%.
He just got outfoxed that night, that afternoon, I think, at the Good Up Centre.
I must be honest with you, that night he wasn't well.
Right.
Unfortunately, but we can't make excuses.
Yeah, it doesn't sit on a box rack.
It doesn't sit on. That's it. He lost the fight, but he came back after that, you know.
Going back to your family, your son, who I've got to tell the viewers and the listeners that I do have a soft spot for the Toweels. I think we know that. We've established that.
Yeah.
But I've seen your son as well. He's 18, 19 now, 19, I think. Loves the sport, always also by your side, wants to get involved. I think sparred and had a few fights himself. How do you feel about your son getting involved in the sport?
I think from a management and trainer perspective, I think it's a very good thing. He's got, you need to have emotional intelligence. You need to have empathy in the sport.
Right, of course, very important.
That's so important. And I think he's got that, and he's got the ability to read a fight, and he helps me with the training.
Yeah,
he's
seen on socials.
Yes,
he's good on the midwork.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm there guiding him, and I do believe in a couple of years' time, once I back away, he'll take over from the Toweel for the Toweel gym. You'll continue the trend.
You think about retirement?
No. I don't want to. I'm still young. No. I'm still young, and I believe I can go for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
Please God, I do believe that.
Big shout out to your son as well if he ever watches this. Question that's sensitive. We share a mutual friend with Rob Katz, and we often have this discussion, Rob and I, and I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you think fighters of yesterday are better than today? And I'm going to ask you a question after you answer that back.
Fighters of yesterday? Yes, without a doubt.
Okay. Why?
If you watch footage of them and fortunate for me, I was in the gym watching my father train the likes of Pierre Ferry, who I believe is one of the South Africa's best light heavyweight we've ever had. Right? If you see how they fought 15 rounds, number one. The amount of punches that they threw in those years, the way Sugar Ray Robinson threw combination, how he did that, going forward, going backward. It's like today we don't see that today.
Right.
Even their defensive skills was
so,
awesome.
Yeah, so that's my next question. So they're better than yesterday's fighters are better than today's. Okay, we can debate this. We can argue. That's not the point of my question. But technically, today's fighters compared to yesterday's fighters.
Without a doubt, yesterday's fighters. I have no doubt. Sugar Ray Leonard.
Well, Sugar Ray Leonard. Well, yeah. So Sugar Leonard's my all-time. Yeah. He's my all-time great fighter of all time. So
Sugar Ray Robinson.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Ezra Charles.
There's some guys in the modern era like Roy Jones Jr. in his prime was sensationally gifted.
Yeah.
You're always going to get
very
those fighters over the years like Mayweather, for example, didn't throw a lot of volume, but his technique was so well placed. Yeah. And then you got a guy like front foot aggressive fighter like Pacquiao, who is just probably could have stood his ground in any era. But I'm saying from a technical perspective, you reckon yesterday's fighters are
without a doubt, yes, I do. I mean, look how clever Duran is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, look how he used to slip punches. He would make you miss inches. I mean, I don't see that today, Mayweather, if you look at Mayweather, I must say, he's a great fighter for today's era, but very boring to watch, specifically the last couple of years.
Who's the greatest fighter of all time, in your opinion?
Sugar Ray Robinson.
Yeah, Walker Smith, agreed. I think the era of today's generation is they're looking at an unbeaten record, and Mayweather really did screw up the system.
I think
they
so.
really did. They think because you got an O that you're the best ever. No, it doesn't work that way.
Absolutely.
Sugar Ray Robinson lost. Exactly.
To be great, you must lose. Yeah. I do believe that.
And fighters can get better after loss.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a great fighter that never even won a world title. His name was Charlie Burley. Great fighter. He beat Ochimua. Ochimua had the highest KO ratio of all fighters, 130-something knockouts. And Ochimua was a great, the fact that Ochimua came to South Africa? Do you know that?
Yeah, he came to South Africa.
1974 around
Seen the pictures.
Yeah.
Did you meet him?
Yes. My uncle Morris brought him in. It was when he promoted that tournament, Makatini and Norman Pangam and Sikapani. He came to our school. He met all the kids surrounded him. What a great fighter. What a great man. Sure. I believe he was the greatest fighter.
Show me some pictures. Yeah. Actually, I want to see that.
Yeah.
Controversial question. How do you think the standard of officiating in South Africa is today? And if BSA, anyone watches it from BSA, it's no punches pulled, you tell it like it is. What do you think?
When you're a recipient of bad decisions, which I'm sure a lot of people are, it does bring you down a bit. And boxing is a very subjective matter. Judging is very subjective in this country. mind you, all over the world.
All over the world.
All over the world, it's the case. I always reminisce, and I think of when I was in my days in SARS, moving away from boxing, when we used to attend management forums, and under the Minister Trevor Manuel. And the biggest thing that they told us, we are servants of the public. There must be transparency, integrity, honesty, and fairness.
Which is lacking in boxing South Africa currently, unless it is
If
changing.
it's changing now,
It's changing.
if they can just apply those principles in judging, in refereeing, we'll be okay.
I agree.
You know?
Proper governance, right?
Yeah, that's what we need.
And management. And
That's
management.
what we need. And it looks like it seems like we're moving in that direction. You know, it seems like it. But like I said, when you become a recipient of bad decisions, it does break you down. And also the sad thing about that is also it breaks down the fighter.
Yeah. I think more than anything else, it's like, because I've also been on the receiving end of crap decisions.
100%.
And, you know, we've shared many dressing rooms, you and I, over the years. And we've looked at each other and we've just kind of shook our heads and thought, you know, F it, you know, it's one of those things. And we're never going to stop bad decisions.
No, it's going to always happen, you see.
But what we can stop is incompetency. What we can stop are poor stoppages. What we can stop are referees counting when the fighter's unconscious, and never in a million years you count a million's gonna, you know, get revived and wake up. And I think that's where we're going wrong. Is there's a lot of flaws in the makeup of officials in this country. And I think one is fitness. I mean, some referees can't even do a sit-up or push-up. And you mentioned common sense and logic. And I think when a fight is in distress and a fight goes on too long, it's not sometimes up to the corners or to the ringside physician. I think it's up to the referees.
100%.
And I don't think their perception is good and strong enough at the moment.
Look, I'm hoping that changes, and I believe it will change. But also, Colin, overseas, I've seen some bad refereeing.
Yeah.
I've seen guys where referee should step in and just stop the fight, you know?
Even the corners, like, I mean,
That's the whole thing. The corner, I believe it's a big responsibility of us as trainers to read the fight and don't rely on the referee to stop the fight.
And I've had many discussions with you on this as well, because I mean, you never stay in touch with me, which is okay, because I often have to phone you and say, are we still friends? But on a serious note, you and I often bitch and moan about a stoppage where they should have been stopped by the corner and stuff. We've had this discussion.
Yes.
And I just think that and you used the word empathy earlier with your son, you know, and I think a lot of the trainers actually don't really recognize and understand how serious our roles are in that corner. We've got someone's life.
That's it.
Literally sitting on our shoulder on a towel. And we've all seen horrific situations in the ring with fighters collapsing
Absolutely.
and passing away and obviously getting knocked unconscious. It's not a nice sport. It's a brutal sport.
That's it.
Not barbaric. And I can have this debate with other people when they think, well, it's brutal, but there's still rules and conduct that govern it to be the sport. You know, barbaric is biting someone's nose off and then just carrying on. You know, that's not what the sport's about. But it's a hard sport. You put your life on the line. And I think a lot of trainers, not just in South Africa, but I think globally, they don't respect their job enough.
That's the thing, you see. The first thing my father taught me, he always said to me, you got a life in your hands.
Right.
And I'll never forget, he was training a guy called Johnny Sham, who was fighting for the South African welterweight title against Gert Kramer. And he was winning the fight. And the 11th round came up and he twisted his ankle. So the 12th round came out. He twisted his ankle in the 11th round. And he was winning the fight. And Johnny wanted to fight. My father said, no. He begged him, no, I don't care. I'm winning. No. He stopped the fight. So going back to what you're saying, it's imperative of us to take cognizance. Don't rely on the referee. You got a life in your hands, like you said. And the moment we see a guy really taking punishment, step in and stop it. Throw the towel in. It doesn't matter. Save him for another day. That's so, so important.
Yeah, I think fighters would obviously leave us. And, you know, we're the first person to get fired in those positions. And for me, it's okay.
But so be it.
Okay,
so be it. That's how it is.
I'm going to leave you with one last question. Your hopes and dreams for your career. You got another 15 years, Alan Toweel Jr.
Yes.
So what are they?
I want to achieve what my grandfather achieved. Training an undisputed world champion. I'm sure that's everybody's wish.
Yeah.
You know, but he's the only trainer to have achieved this in this country. If I can do that, I'll be happy, you know. And also, you know what it is? It's not about trying to please other people. It's just my family, just to solidify my family's heritage. You understand what I'm saying? I just want to achieve something like that for the sake of my father, for my uncles, for my grandfather. If I can do that, that's cool. Let's see.
Alan Toweel Jr. here on No Punches Pulled. Myself, Colin Nathan, Omni Audio Africa. We'll see you again next week.
Welcome to Omni Sport, the ultimate African sports audio channel. Live and on demand at omniaudio.africa and streaming data free on the MTN network in South Africa. It's where Africa comes to play.